that that really gets at the heart of why I'm so captivated with philosophy too, and why for both of us, philosophy has never been just philosophy. Like,
Yeah,
we
definitely.
also are both writers, and while I'm not an artist in the way that you are, nor could ever be, your
Yeah,
talent
yeah,
is
yeah. You're
like,
definitely creative. I mean,
thank you.
what you've done is like you've created a collective from the ground up, you
Well,
know?
that's kind of like what I would equate as like my trying to live philosophy, right? And
Yeah,
it's obviously different in a different medium, but like still creative, right?
yeah,
And I think that it's so important to have this conversation around philosophy as a pursuit for how we live our life, and not just like, obviously that's kind of been a like, Aristotle was very much about that. Sartre kind of took us back to that in this other way that's like, it's not just, oh, how do we approach like human flourishing? How do we approach growth? How do we approach care and conception of self? But like, how do you actually live out your values? How do
yeah,
you actually
yeah, yeah.
live your belief? And philosophy is like, can't be just intellectual, and so often it is.
Yes,
And
100%.
it's, I think that that's really sitting at the core of what we're doing here, is trying to like breathe life into this facet of philosophy. And like, everything that you just said is living example as why that's important, and I think
Mhm.
makes it so much more accessible to people who are like, hey, I'm not going to sit down and read
Yeah,
an essay from someone using dense language that's like
yeah,
purposefully trying to be like
yeah.
obtuse and
Confusing, yeah.
obstructive. Yeah.
Throwing in Latin phrases just to sound smart. We know how they
Right.
do it.
Yeah. Well, it's like, sure, we could if we wanted to, but why? Because at the end of the
Right.
day, aren't we trying to make meaning by conveying a message to someone else? And I think what you said about like the difference in medium between writing being about a specific, like concise, clear message, whereas art is so much more open ended. I think that both have the nature of like, once it leaves your hands, it's no longer just yours. Like, anyone
Right.
can also interpret anything from writing, like
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
poetry, I think is where we
Yeah, I
really
was
see the
gonna
middle
say,
ground
like,
there.
it's not always like
Right.
it's debatable whether it's impossible to write something and there's a whole another side of philosophy that's that conversation about, okay, when I say I have a blue door or something, I don't know, like, is that the same mental picture in somebody else's head? So
Right. Like, what does
that's
all of that
also a whole nother
actually,
can of worms.
yeah, mean? But there is something different in the way that meaning is made by the viewer, by the reader, in reading a text and
Yeah,
viewing a painting. And I think the fact that that is different, and we can practice both, I don't know. It's just
yeah.
cool to me.
It's cool, and I think also in terms of the Western philosophical tradition, there's definitely a, I guess, sort of a hierarchy give or like a prioritization of language over images, I guess, in terms of how philosophy is conducted, you know?
Totally.
And I think maybe a philosophy that could get more into the power of images, of art, or music, for example, to communicate meaning is like a whole nother thing. And maybe even something that would get more at like the core of what it means to be human. I don't know. Also, music. Like, music to me, certain pieces of music are capable of communicating like something to the extent that I can only dream of
Yeah.
aspiring to, like in language or visual art. Like, what's that? What's going on
Yeah.
there?
What's going on there? I think there's
Yeah.
also, just to further the what's going on there, the experience of like transcendence that so many people have through music. Like, we know that that's why like so many people feel transcendence in church. And obviously, for a lot of
Yeah.
people, that like fires up a different part of their brain than when you're at a concert. But for some people, it's the same part of their brain that's fired up. That's
Yeah.
like, I would argue for me, when I was little and still considered myself a Christian and went to like mega church with like the rock music that was
Oh, hell yeah.
holy is our Lord. And it was all of that. Like, oh my gosh, I was there on Wednesday nights,
You were
like 12-year-old
transcending
old
it.
Reese, hands in the air, like, yes. But that's
Amazing.
also what it feels like to be at a concert with like my friends and in this
Yeah.
community of people who are experiencing it. That does so get at the heart of human experience. That's almost like it stops me in my tracks, like, and I have to take a breath. But that's also what like my favorite works of art do. But it's
Yeah.
still different. And like
Yeah.
I don't have the words for why those two things
Right.
feel different. It's like the
Yeah, yeah.
unutterableness of those experiences.
Right. Like, how is the experience of art? Like, what's the qualitative difference between having like a sort of like transcendental encounter with a painting versus like a violin concerto or something like that, you
Yeah.
know? Um, yeah. I'm not sure. It's a mystery.
Yeah. I think it lies in experience.